I'm Mono, and wait a minute, this isn't HLL, this is Scriptum, the other hardcore milsim World War II game that you might have heard of. In this video, I'll be taking a look at Scriptum and see how it stacks up against the competition, but more importantly, what makes Scriptum unique and worthy or not worthy of your time. Now, before I get started, I have a quick announcement. I've started a podcast called Mono's Game Club together with Pterodactyl and Rasbora, two other HLL streamers and content creators. Now, you can find that on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. It's a show where we talk about the games that we've been playing, video game related news, and overall just try and have a fun conversation. So if you're looking for a fresh new podcast to listen, please give it a listen and let us know what you think. Alright, let's talk Scriptum. Scriptum got started as a mod for Squad before becoming a fully fledged standalone game featuring large-scale, semi-realistic war scenarios with up to 40 players per side. If I had a scale where on one side there's games like Battlefield and Call of Duty and Arma on the other side, I would put HLL smack in the middle and Scriptum a bit further to the right between HLL and Arma, probably next to Squad. It's a slower paced game, one that punishes movement with increased weapon sway and other mechanics, but one that doesn't completely eliminate the fun out of shooting as much as I was afraid that it could. You're still able to have some very cool action moments. And though sheer skill with the mouse is second place to tactics, if you pride yourself in your ability to land headshots, you will still find combat rewarding and engaging. It's just a different style, and I want to focus a bit on this because it's one of the main differences to something like HLL and most other shooters out there. While in HLL you can run and gun like a Battlefield game where you can shoot out of a sprint with full accuracy, that's not the case here. The stamina and weapon sway systems are set up so movement is more about getting into position than it is about maneuvering during combat. Stamina will drain quite a bit while you sprint, but it depletes surprisingly fast when you're crouch running or moving while prone. So you can sprint for a considerable distance at a speed that is surprisingly high, but moving around too much once you get into position has you starving for stamina. These are not exact figures, but imagine if your stamina is like good for either 500 meters sprinting or a 50 meter radius of combat style movement. I find it to be very strange, but it works to set the playstyle that they want to achieve. You're not moving around a building, constantly looking through different windows and running up and down the stairs looking for enemies and stuff like that. Instead, players will take positions and hold them while carefully considering their next move. It's a much more accurate portrayal of how a real engagement would play out, with a much more deliberate transition between action and movement. It's a slower pace, but one that doesn't affect the speed of you getting into the action, but rather affects it once you get into the action. Hopefully that makes sense. And now I have to talk about the Canteen mechanic because I absolutely hate it. You can replenish stamina quite quickly, pulling out a canteen and drinking water. This will temporarily buff your stamina regeneration, and yeah, I just really dislike this mechanic. Having to put down your gun and change items takes too long because that's something that's slow in the game. Switching weapons is super slow, so having to do that, it's super clunky and super slow. And the other way to replenish stamina is standing still or being crouched or prone, with more stamina regeneration the further down that you go basically. But it's still too slow. It takes too long to regenerate the stamina this way. And I don't know, I just find the Canteen mechanic to be just dumb. I don't like chores in games, and this feels exactly like one. I get that it is there to make sure that you're just not sprinting around everywhere and, you know, doing that while in combat, but the solution isn't elegant at all, I'd say. I don't think it makes the game better. And then there's the fact that, as I said, the sprinting speed is insane, and with the kind of dated animations that the game has, it looks super out of place, especially at a distance. And I don't know, overall, like, the movement and the stamina thing is a bit jarring, I think. So in terms of movement and gunplay, let's put it this way. Some hardcore games like HLL could easily have a team deathmatch mode and it would be a ton of fun. Scriptum isn't one of those games. In terms of how spawn points work, you have different types of spawn points. Some being for the entire team, others being only for your squad, some, being vehicles and stuff. So much of the same considerations apply if you're used to Hella Loose. If people don't build spawn points or build them too far away, things can get quite boring. And things get even worse if nobody is pushing the enemy flanks and instead they just spawn at the exact same location every single time and run straight into the enemy front lines. I didn't expect to find the exact same frustrations as in Hella Loose, but I kinda did. Squad leaders failing to provide spawn points or lacking the imagination or foresight to flank the enemy are very much a thing. So are squads where no one seems to be communicating. I was actually quite surprised by this, as I expected the player base of a more hardcore style game to be way more rigid and serious about the game than they actually seem to be. Keep in mind, however, that just like in every other game where communication plays a huge role, experiences will vary dramatically between different servers, and even then, matches can be very dependent on the player base at that particular moment. So, my experience might not be everyone else's experience. Another major difference with Hella Loose are the graphics and the sounds. The graphics are alright, not too bad, but definitely not spectacular. The main problem is the absolute lack of objects in the game. Levels feel completely empty because despite there being a huge number of buildings, most of them with fully accessible interiors, those interiors are just walls and nothing else. You won't find a table or a chair or a street lamp or anything really. There's basically no detail, no nuance. There's some things here and there, but not something to the level that most people are accustomed to in a video game. It's like playing behind the scenes of a movie set where you can see that everything is just fake and it only really holds up when you're looking at it from far away. This is also the case in Squad, but most Squad maps are in deserted and remote areas, so it's kind of not as big as a deal there. It's quite different when you're in a huge European city with all these streets and buildings and it's just gray walls everywhere. The only thing that is actually really good about the graphics is the explosions. The explosions and the effects and everything about them is insane. The sound design is brilliant and it's quite superior to Hella Loose, or in fact most other games, I think. The crack of gunshots, the way the tank shells whiz past you, the explosions, the way the airplanes sound, if you've ever heard a propeller engine from an airplane in real life, they sound exactly like that in the game. The Stuka sound is absolutely incredible. It's that very bassy, full sound of the engine of those planes that they had back in the day. It's absolutely perfect and it creates a wonderfully immersive experience when you're in the thick of combat and there's like a whole lot of things going on. It's very violent and it's equally beautiful, and this extends to pretty much every single sound in the game. Standing next to a tank that's firing is unpleasant, and it should be, So yeah, the sounds are just insanely good. The graphics, not so much. They're good enough, they work, and that's about it. Apart from that, the amount of content of the game is absolutely staggering. Scriptum has 5 different armies with a huge selection of vehicles and weapons. There are 11 maps ranging from smaller ones to gigantic ones, spanning several kilometers in each direction. The tanks have been completely overhauled in a recent patch, and the work they've done is just amazing. I won't go over it in detail, like all of it, because there's an excellent video from Periscope Games explaining everything in detail, but there's calculations for the ricochet of the armor-piercing round inside the tank. There's multiple different components that can be damaged and so on. There's an insane amount of detail from the way you get into the tanks by actually opening the hatch to the position you want to be in, to the explosions themselves, where you see like little pieces of hot metal smoking as they land around the tank. It's really good. This is like a tanker's wet dream. The vehicles themselves are also accurate to how they were in real life. They are a bit faster maybe because you can reach the max speeds of each vehicle in situations where you really couldn't. But for example, the turning rate for the turrets, everything, it's quite realistic, and that's amazing to see because Hella Loose, I think, really struggles with this. Because right now tanks are super slow in that game, much slower than they were in real life, and You can't like peek out of the hatches and stuff like that, which you can do in Postscriptum. However, due to the relatively small sizes of the maps in Hell Let Loose, if tanks were more realistic, they would probably be too powerful, and peeking out of hatches would get you killed almost instantly from nearby infantry, far more frequently than it does in Postscriptum, just due to the nature of the engagements in each game. In Postscriptum, however, they work really well, and I think if you have a tank crew that you regularly play with, you can have an absolute blast in this game. It's something that I only touched upon in my time with the game, but one of the things that I really want to play more of. I haven't tried the commander role or the squad leader role yet, and there's definitely a relatively harsh learning curve to the game overall, very much like Hell Let Loose. There's an in-game firing range with some in-game explanation for different mechanics, but there are still many aspects to the game that are not really explained to a new player. There's definitely a bit of asking around that you need to engage with as a new player, and there's not a huge amount of resources available on like YouTube and stuff, unfortunately. So if you're looking at getting into Postscriptum, especially coming in from something like Hell Let Loose, that's kind of what you need to know. Postscriptum is more about simulation than it is about the game, if that makes sense. Not to demerit it in any way, it's like the role-playing version of Hell Let Loose, where there's more underlying systems affecting your gameplay, and the focus isn't so much on the action and the fun as it is on accurately portraying or representing those engagements. It's not a game that I would choose to play over Hell Let Loose, primarily due to the gunplay. I like the run and gun aspect of Hell Let Loose because it feels similar to old games like Day of Defeat, Battlefield, Forgotten Hope, and stuff like that. So to me, it's the perfect balance between being arcadey and being realistic. And I think it has one of the best gunplays of the market right now. This doesn't have that style of gunplay, and while I enjoy what it has to offer, and I value those differences, Hell Let Loose is more my style of game, just like Battlefield is more my style than Call of Duty. It's just like different flavors, right? For those more into the logistical and tactical and realistic aspect of battle, without having such a big emphasis in individual skill, I think Postscriptum is pretty awesome. I might keep playing it more because I do find the different style of combat to be refreshing, but right now, with how many games are coming out this year, I'm not sure how much I will be getting into it. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, then please give it a like and a sub if you haven't already and you feel like checking out more of the channel in the future. I very much appreciate it. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope I will catch you in the next one.